And our next question tonight is on the NHS. It's an area where powers are devolved to the Scottish Parliament and to the assemblies in Wales and Northern Ireland. This debate is about the election of the Parliament at Westminster, where MPs legislate on health matters in England. And our question comes from Terry Kelly.
As a 63-year-old, I've grown up with the NHS and have recently retired after 30 years of working there. So you can understand I'm strongly passionate about it. My question is this. How will your party ensure long-term funding for the NHS whilst keeping it as a public service accessible to all?
Thank you very much indeed, Terry. And I'll turn first to Nigel Farage.
Well, Terry, like you, I care about the NHS because I've had so many scrapes in my life. I've needed it far more than most people. And I think that when it comes to emergency care, it probably is the best in the world. That doesn't mean there aren't some things that occasionally go wrong. This whole question of how we fund the health service with a population that's rapidly rising, with a population that is ageing, is a huge question. We've had a big internal debate in our party about it, and we've decided the best way to do it is to run it efficiently, to run it as a public service, free at the point of access, but to recognise that there has been a 48% growth in middle management of the NHS since 1997. The Labour Party attempted to privatise large chunks of the health service. That I also don't believe has worked. I put an extra £3 billion in from savings to our EU contributions, and I'd stop the tax on illness by ending hospital parking charges.
Nigel Farage, thank you. Nicola Sturgeon.
In Scotland, we've already ended hospital parking charges. Terry, this is a really important question. The NHS is the most precious public service we've got. I was Scottish Health Secretary for 5 years. In Scotland, we've protected the budget of the NHS, and we will always do so. We also believe passionately that the NHS should always be run as a public service, not for private profit. That's why we oppose the privatisation that is happening in England. We oppose it in principle, but also because it poses a risk in the long term to Scotland's budget, and that's why SNP MPs in the House of Commons will take the opportunity to vote against any extension to privatisation in England, and it's one of the many ways in which we'll seek to build progressive alliances to protect things that matter to all of us. But the best thing we can do for the NHS is to end austerity. You'll hear the other parties tonight talk about increasing funding, but if they try to do that within the framework of overall spending cuts, then they'll have to cut even deeper elsewhere. And anybody that tells you that cutting the social care budget or the welfare budget is good for the NHS is wrong. Let's lift austerity, invest in the NHS, but without making deeper cuts elsewhere.
Nicola Sturgeon, thank you. Natalie Bennett.
Well, Terry, I think it's really worth noting how the NHS wasn't a huge issue in the 2010 election, but it's a huge issue now. In 2010, we were well aware of the huge costs of the private finance initiative and how there was already a creeping privatisation of the NHS. But what we've seen since then, particularly with the Health and Social Care Act, has been a race towards setting up the structures for privatisation. Now, what we say in the Green Party is very simple. The profit motive should have no place in healthcare. We're not happy with 5% of money that's supposed to be for healthcare going in profits. We want 0% going in profits. And to make our NHS more efficient, to deal with some of its problems, what we need to do is take the whole market mechanism out of the NHS, the whole purchaser-provider split that the Health Select Committee in 2010 said was costing us £10 billion a year. We need to put more money in, and in the Green Party we want the free prescriptions they've got in Scotland, plus free eye care and free dental. But we need to look at the structures and say no private profit.
Natalie Bennett, thank you very much indeed. Nick Clegg.
Well, look, we've heard lots of warm words here about the NHS. Of course, we all love the NHS, but the NHS doesn't need warm words, it needs hard cash. And I'll give you the precise number of how much extra cash it needs. It needs £8 billion by the end of the next Parliament. That is what a man called Simon Stevens, who runs NHS England, he's independent of politics, has said it needs. Now, the Liberal Democrats have a plan about how to find that £8 billion. Unlike the Conservatives, we'll ask the richest to pay a little extra in tax for the NHS, closing the reliefs, for instance, in capital gains tax. Unlike Labour, we'll also be able to put money in the NHS because we'll actually get the job done of balancing the books, and then we can invest in the NHS. That is the way to balance the books and invest in the NHS. It means £8 billion more here, £800 million more for the NHS in Scotland, and £450 million more in Wales. And my challenge to the leaders here is, if you love the NHS so much, why don't you put your money where your heart is?
Nick Clegg, thank you. Leanne Wood.
Plaid Cymru is proud that Wales gave the world the NHS. It's probably one of the most important contributions of our modern age, and it was based on a scheme founded by people contributing together to fund the health that they needed collectively. The NHS is precious and it must be defended against privatisation, and the NHS in Wales faces two threats. One, from continued austerity and cuts, but two, from centralisation under Labour in Wales. Plaid Cymru wants to recruit and attract an additional 1,000 doctors into the Welsh NHS to bring us up to the same level as the rest of the UK. At the moment, we're way behind. We have fewer doctors per head of the population than the vast majority of countries in the EU. The NHS needs to be funded through general taxation.
Leanne Wood, thank you. Ed Miliband.
Terry, like so many people around the country, I'm deeply concerned about what I see happening in our National Health Service, because we see people waiting longer for their test results, longer in A&E, longer to see a GP, longer to have an operation. We've got to turn it round. And when you hear from us leaders tonight, I think at home you should ask, where specifically is the money coming from? I'll tell you. We're going to have a mansion tax on the most expensive homes above £2 million. That's a clear promise from us. We're going to get money from those hedge funds who are engaging in tax avoidance, and we're going to get money from the tobacco companies for a £2.5 billion time to care fund. That will hire 20,000 more nurses, 8,000 more doctors, 5,000 more care workers, and 3,000 more midwives. And it's not just more staff, because it's also joining up services from home to hospital, taking on the biggest challenge our NHS faces, which is an ageing population. Because if people can't get in to see their GP or can't be looked after at home, they end up in A&E. It's a plan to turn the NHS round.
Ed Miliband, thank you. David Cameron.
Well, first of all, thank you, Terry, for your incredible service to the NHS. And you're absolutely right. This is the most important national institution and national public service that we have. And I'll never forget, as a dad of a desperately disabled child, what I got every night when I took him to hospital, worrying about his health. I got unbelievable care, and I just want that for every family and for everyone in our country. Now, we've been talking about the difficult decisions we had to make to turn the economy around, but a difficult decision we made also was to go on funding the NHS, putting more money in every year, and we go on doing that in the next Parliament. That meant that we've trained 7,000 more nurses, we've got 9,000 more doctors, and we also managed to take out of the NHS 20,000 bureaucrats, because I want the money spent on patient care. Now, it's key that we keep a strong economy in order to fund a strong NHS. And I want to see the NHS move to much more 7-day operation, like your GP being open 8 in the morning, 8 in the evening, all the way through the week. There's one point I want to end on. There's only one group of politicians anywhere in this United Kingdom who've cut the NHS in the last 5 years, and that was the Labour Party in Wales. So when you hear Ed Miliband's promises, think about that.